Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a slow, creaky walk through the hallways, kitchens, and courtyards of a 1920s New York City tenement. You're not just peeking in, you're moving in, room by room. You'll smell the starch from yesterday's laundry, hear the steady drip from a cracked pipe, and feel the soft crunch of coal dust underfoot. It's the kind of place where four families might share a single hallway and an argument about who gets the wash tub first, where a stray cat knows more gossip than you ever will, and where sleep, when it comes, smells faintly of potatoes and old newspapers. And yes, spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this. Not without your oat milk latte and a working thermostat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the front steps of a tenement on the Lower East Side. It's late afternoon in October, though time feels sticky here. The street is a chorus of clangs, yells, and the occasional clang of a distant piano someone's trying to tune with a frying pan. Directly ahead, 5 stories of brick stacked like old shoeboxes, each one packed tight with human hope and a bit of mildew. The building leans a little left, like it's heard too many secrets and now struggles to stand straight. A lace curtain twitches in the second-floor window. Someone's watching you. Or maybe they're just adjusting the clothespin for better airflow. Either way, privacy's a myth in this place. You learn to share everything here, including your business. The front stoop, your grand entryway, is wide enough for 5 neighbors, 3 children, and a pile of unswept breadcrumbs from lunch. 2 women sit on overturned milk crates, peeling potatoes and arguing about the price of salt. One of them uses her elbow to wave off a kid trying to balance on the iron railing. A shoelace dangles from the second story, connected to a small metal bucket. It slowly descends toward the sidewalk. Inside, 2 onions and a scrap of butcher paper. Someone's grocery haul, lowered with precision. The pulley system of the poor. The air smells like a blend of cabbage, coal smoke, and ambition. And laundry, there's always laundry. Lines stretch across the alley like spiderwebs from windows, flapping with trousers and damp undershirts, all in shades of gray and determination. Behind you, a horse-drawn wagon rattles by, its wheels clicking like an old metronome. The driver hums a tune that might be Irish, might be Yiddish, or might just be what happens when you've had 4 hours of sleep and too much molasses. You spot a kid selling pickles from a barrel 5 cents each, unless he thinks you're from uptown. Then it's 10. Always with the sliding scale. He leans against the lamppost like he owns it, eyes scanning the tenement windows like a detective in training. You make your way up the steps, careful not to trip over the sleeping cat curled beside the rail. It has one eye, no collar, and clearly considers itself the landlord. You nod respectfully. It blinks back. Deal struck. Behind you, someone yells in Italian. Someone else laughs in Polish. It's not chaos, it's chorus. And it plays from morning till the stars show up, blinking through the haze above Delancey Street. Up close, the door is scratched, scarred, and painted with 15 layers of hopeful brown. The handle is cold, stubborn, and clearly doesn't like strangers. You jiggle it, and it reluctantly agrees to let you in. Inside, the sound changes. Outside was clang and shout. Inside is clatter and hush. A baby cries softly behind a wall, thin enough to hear dreams through. Your footfalls echo on cracked tile, each step waking ghosts and mice in equal measure. Welcome to your new home. The tenement may be crowded and crooked, but it's also honest. Every wall has ears. Every floor has a story. And every night, as people lay their heads on lumpy pillows or folded coats, this place sighs with the weight of 1,000 half-whispered hopes. Historians still argue whether tenement living made people more resilient or just more tired. One 1922 social report called it a furnace of invention, where necessity produced everything from sock-darning contraptions to makeshift birth control devices made out of beeswax and confusion. But you just arrived, and there's a lot to see. Each room in this building is its own little universe, orbiting around a single bathroom that may or may not work. So take off your coat if you have one. Tuck your boots under the stairwell and follow the smell of soup. Because we're just getting started. You've barely stepped inside before you're pulled back out again by the noise. The front door slams shut behind you with the kind of bang that sets off 3 babies and a barking dog. But rather than rush upstairs to escape the ruckus, you pause. You step outside again onto the front stoop. Because this, right here, is where tenement life truly begins. The stoop isn't just a few step sits the heartbeat of the whole building. It's late afternoon now, and the sun has decided to lower itself lazily between the rooftops, pouring honey-colored light onto the crowded street. 5 broad stone steps lead from the sidewalk to the building's creaky front door, and every one of those steps is occupied. If not by people, then by laundry baskets, tin pails, or a cat that no one owns, but everyone feeds. To your left, Mrs. O'Malley is perched on an upturned crate, wrapped in a shawl that looks hand-woven, though no one can remember when. She's yelling across the street at a woman leaning out of a third-floor window. The topic seems to be a rogue chicken, the same damn bird that escaped last Thursday, she insists, and laid an egg in the shoemaker's hat. The window lady laughs, slaps her thigh, and disappears back inside. Beside Mrs. O'Malley sits Mr. Zuckerman, a retired watchmaker who now devotes his energy to whittling small wooden objects. Whether they're buttons, pipes, or chess pieces is up for debate, he never says. He nods at you, muttering something in a blend of English and Yiddish, then resumes carving with quiet intensity, pausing occasionally to cough or spit expertly between the wrought iron rails. A group of children race up and down the steps, shouting something that sounds like a game, but may also involve accusations of cheating, stolen marbles, and an imaginary dragon. One barefoot boy runs directly between your knees without so much as a sorry, leaving behind a faint trail of chalk dust and pickled herring smell. And oh, the smells. The street is a carnival of aromas. Onions frying, cigar smoke curling from a neighbor's lips, damp wool drying in the sun, and the ever-present background scent of coal soot and boiled cabbage. Every family adds its own flavor to the stew. The push carts roll past in slow procession, like traveling vendors in an old parade. One sells pickles from a barrel, each brined cucumber pulled out with tongs and dropped into a paper cone. Another offers pretzel shard, knotted loops of baked dough slathered in rock salt. A wiry boy, with sharp eyes and quick hands, pushes a cart loaded with candied nuts, the sugary scent melting into the air. You buy a pretzel knot because you're especially hungry, but because the boy selling it gives you a look that says, "You wouldn't dare walk away." It's warm in the middle, a bit tough around the edges, and so salty your lips practically shrivel. Still, you eat the whole thing. It's part of the ritual now. The stoop itself is chipped and worn from generations of shoes, boots, and the occasional angry broom. It serves as porch, bench, table, podium, confessional. In the summer, it's where neighbors fan themselves and complain about the heat. In the winter, they sit on folded newspapers, sipping from tin mugs and staring out into the quiet snow. Every language you've ever heard is spoken here, sometimes in the same conversation. English slurs into Italian, which blends into Polish and back again. You hear curses in Greek, lullabies in German, and a riddle told in Ladino by a little girl to a one-eyed cat, which listens like it understands every word. A woman with frizzy hair leans out of a second-story window, shaking a rug with aggressive intent. Dust rains down, almost poetically, onto the shoulder of a man polishing shoes on the curb. He doesn't flinch, just adjusts his cap and keeps shining. His stool wobbles, his rags blur, and every boot he touches comes away gleaming, no matter how hopeless it looked. You lean back now, resting against the iron railing, which offers just enough support to make you question its stability. The sun continues its slow descent, casting long shadows and bathing the building in a warm, forgiving light. A toddler with only one sock emerges from the doorway behind you, dragging a wooden spoon and glaring like she's been asked to pay rent. She sits beside you, offering half a cracker she's been licking. You decline politely. She shrugs, eats it herself, and leans against your arm like you've been friends forever. Historians still argue whether these stoops were symbols of urban failure or grassroots community. Were they markers of overcrowding and neglect, or stages where immigrant life flourished against the odds? Depending on the day, the answer could be both. One thing's for sure: the stoop has seen more life than any drawing room on Fifth Avenue ever will. As the light fades, the pace slows. Fewer carts now, fewer screams. A violin begins to wail from an upper window, notes wobbling like a baby deer on ice. Someone shouts, "Play something happy." The player responds with something even sadder. Everyone claps anyway. Someone lights a cigarette. Someone else lights a stove. A soft breeze picks up the corner of a newspaper, which flutters across the stoop like a lazy ghost. The toddler beside you yawns without shame. You could stay here forever, but you've only just arrived. Behind that stubborn brown door waits a whole world of creaking floors, flickering gas lights, and rooms too small to stand in, but too full of life to ignore. So, you rise slowly, brushing crumbs from your lap and offering a small bow to the cat now curled beside the step. It does not bow back. You place your hand on the door handle once more. It groans under your grip, like it's debating whether to admit you again. Then click. You're in. The stoop fades behind you, replaced by the darker, denser sounds of life inside. The real journey is just beginning. The door shuts behind you with a reluctant thud, muffling the riot of the stoop and replacing it with something denser and closer. Inside the tenement, the air feels heavy, as if you're walking into a curtain woven from coal dust, cabbage steam, and 3 generations of sighs. This isn't just an entryway. It's a passage into a different world, wrapped in chipped plaster and secrets no one bothers to hide. You step onto the worn tile floor, your boots clicking faintly. The tiles were once a pattern, probably floral, perhaps geometric, but now they're mostly beige, brown, and guesswork. Decades of foot traffic have rubbed away any clarity. Some pieces are cracked, others missing entirely, replaced with patchy concrete filler that tries and fails to blend in. The walls on either side rise like tired shoulders. They're painted a shade that might have once been cheerful, but has since faded into the universal color of neglected hallway. Patches of water damage bloom in soft brown halos, especially around the ceiling, where the plaster is beginning to curl like old wallpaper. You think you hear something scratching above you, but choose not to investigate. The air is something else entirely. It's a thick blend of lingering kerosene from a heater someone never quite turned off, boiled cabbage from the apartment next door, the sour tang of old newspapers, and what might be laundry soap or might be yesterday's dishwater. There's something vaguely sweet in the background too, like fermenting apples, or maybe a hidden stash of onions past their prime. You pause under a single gaslight fixture overhead. Its bulb is clouded with soot, its wire loosely dangling from the ceiling like a lazy spider leg. It emits just enough light to cast a buttery yellow glow on everything below, highlighting dust motes drifting lazily through the air like tiny, tired ghosts. A battered coat rack leans against one wall, crooked but hanging on. It holds two heavy wool coats, both sagging with dampness and history. One is missing a button. The other has a glove still tucked in the pocket small, knitted, with a hole in the thumb. It might belong to the boy who always runs through the stairwell with untied shoes and a defiant grin. Or maybe it was left there last winter and simply never claimed. Either option feels equally true. Near the stairwell, an old radiator clunks and hisses, its metal ribs warm to the touch, but making no promises about actual heat. Someone's left a tin of shoe polish nearby, balanced atop it, slowly melting into a shiny puddle that smells like vinegar and leather. To your right, a thin wooden door rattles faintly. You hear voices behind a tone high, one low, speaking in rapid Italian. The exchange rises to a brief shout, then falls again into laughter. Then the sound of a violin squeaks out one defiant, screechy note. You wonder if someone's practicing, or if they've decided to murder a cat by string quartet. You move farther down the narrow passage, stepping over a shoe that's been left in the middle of the floor. It's a child's size, scuffed and cracked, and pointing toward a pair of empty water buckets stacked beside a radiator. Maybe someone meant to fetch water hours ago and forgot. Or maybe they were interrupted by life, which tends to do that here. The mailboxes are tucked into a wooden frame bolted to the wall near the stairwell. Each slot is labeled in faded ink. Zuckerman, Rizzo, Chang, O'Malley, Goldstein. Some of the labels are peeling. One box has been stuffed with so many circulars and handbills that the door doesn't close anymore. Another holds nothing but a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts, balanced like a dare. You consider taking it, but decide against it. In this building, even a playing card might have an owner. A baby begins to cry somewhere above you, sharp at first, then quickly soothed by a lullaby hummed in Polish. You can't see the singer, but their voice flows down the stairwell like steam, brushing against the walls and curling into your ears. Historians still argue whether entryways like this were designed with care or simply squeezed in as afterthoughts. In most cases, they served no decorative function. They weren't built to welcome, they were built to funnel, to move bodies from street to stairwell, from cold to slightly less cold. But despite their bare bones, these narrow halls were often the site of unspoken rituals. Hellos, nods, mail drops, dropped keys, first kisses, last words. You take a breath and lean against the banister at the foot of the stairs. The railing is smooth from years of use coated in a gloss, not from varnish, but from generations of palms. The wood is dark, old oak perhaps, with small cracks running like veins down its length. A child's initials are carved into one post, though time has worn them into illegibility. In one corner, a stack of old newspapers rests atop a crate. The top issue is dated 2 weeks ago. You glance at the headlines, but the words blur in the low light. Beside the crate, someone has placed a small mirror crack, spotted, framed in tin. You catch a glimpse of yourself, a little hunched, dust smudged, illuminated in flickering yellow light. The reflection seems older than you remember. You nod to it. It does not nod back. Another noise, this time. A pot clanging against tile. A distant door slams. Somewhere, a dog yaps once, then falls silent. You realize you've been standing here for several minutes, soaking in the silence between the sounds. In a building this alive, even the quiet feels inhabited. And yet, for all its grime and shadow, this entryway has a strange charm. It is, after all, the first chapter of the building's story. Everything starts here. The worn tiles, the shared smells, the layered echoes, they're all part of the prologue. But this isn't where you stop. This is just the beginning. You lift your foot and place it on the first stair. It creaks not menacingly, but like it's stretching awake. One flight up waits a family kitchen that doubles as a bedroom. And above that, a parlor filled with chickens, lace doilies, and broken dreams. But for now, it's just you, the railing, and the sound of your own breath. The building waits. And so, you climb. The stairwell breathes beneath your feet. As you begin your ascent, each wooden step offers a different kind of protest. Some creak, long and slow. Others emit quick, sharp squeals, and one, near the middle, thuds like a sleepy heartbeat. The whole staircase has a slight lean to the right, just enough to make you wonder whether the building itself is shrugging under the weight of too many lives stacked too tightly. The walls are covered in decades of grime and effort. Pale green paint clings to the lower half of the plaster, cracked and curling like old skin. The upper half is bare grayish white, smudged with so many hands that it's hard to tell where fingerprints end and shadow begins. Some attempt at decoration peeks through a scrap of lace nailed to a windowsill, a postcard of the Virgin Mary tacked above a doorway, a rusted horseshoe someone nailed near the ceiling. For luck, or maybe just for company. You reach the landing between floors and pause. The air here is denser than downstairs, less touched by the breeze from the street, and more infused with the personality of the building itself. It smells like kerosene, boiled onions, stale coffee, and something vaguely sweet, like wet bread or drying laundry. There's a whiff of old glue, and your boots stick ever so slightly to the worn wood as you shift your weight. Overhead, a single gas lamp buzzes softly. Its glass globe is darkened by soot, and it flickers with a rhythm that might almost be music. You squint through the gloom and see the wire snaking up into the ceiling, anchored with bent nails that gave up doing their job years ago. You take a few more steps and stop in front of a door just off the stairwell, slightly ajar. A sign handwritten and barely legible says, Rubenstein, Shoe Repair, though the R is missing and the I has been replaced with a thumbtack. You knock once. A grunt from inside tells you that's permission enough. The apartment is tiny. Calling it a room would be generous. Calling it a home feels bold. You step through the doorway and into the world of the shoemaker. It's dark, but not in a sinister way. The light from the single window more wax paper, then glass filters in weakly, casting a creamy glow over the room. There's no lamp, only a pair of candles stuck into the necks of old soda bottles, flickering on a side table that's also the dining table, sewing table, and possibly a bed for someone who sleeps curled up. The first thing you notice is the smell. Leather, glue, tobacco, and old sweat. Then you see the man himself. Rubinstein, you presume. He's hunched over a wooden workbench, barely bigger than a suitcase, hammering a sole into place with slow, measured taps. He doesn't look up. He doesn't need to. His fingers move like they've memorized every shoe in the neighborhood. Nearby, a child maybe 5 years old crawls across the floor with a scrap of shoelace in hand, pretending it's a snake. He laughs quietly to himself, oblivious to the hammering. There's no separation between work and home here. The wall above the bench is lined with rows of shoe molds wooden forms shaped like feet, some tiny, some large, all scarred and darkened with age. A few hang from nails by frayed string. Others sit in piles, as if waiting for their partners to come home. Beds, if you can call them that, are everywhere. One in the corner behind a curtain, just a pile of blankets on a thin mattress. Another on top of a high shelf, accessed by a wooden crate turned into a step. One small hammock sways lightly from the ceiling, no doubt the sleeping place of the smallest child. At the far end of the room, a woman-tired, hair wrapped in cloth sits beside a pot, stirring something that smells like cabbage soup stretched thin with water. She nods once at you, not unfriendly, just distracted. The walls are patched with old newspapers, not for reading, but for insulation. Headlines from 1916 and 1919 tell stories of ships and strikes and storms. Over one patch, someone has scribbled multiplication tables in pencil practice for a child, perhaps, or an adult learning numbers for the first time. In another corner, a calendar from 1920 still hangs, frozen on July. Above the stove is a small shelf holding a cracked teacup, a tin of buttons, a rosary, and what looks like a dried flower in a thimble. Beside it, a family photo black and white. Faded shows 7 people with solemn faces, all dressed in their best clothes, trying to look serious but not afraid. The shoemaker finally looks up, only briefly. His eyes are watery but sharp. He gestures at the boot in his hand and says, in a voice hoarse from glue fumes, "She wants it by Sunday." You nod, though you don't know who she is. He shrugs and returns to his work. Behind him, another curtain rustles. You hear someone coughing, a dry, hollow sound, then the clink of dishes, a lullaby sung in Hungarian, and the low murmur of a radio station barely audible through the static. Historians still argue whether families like this were crushed under the weight of urban poverty or sustained by their ability to adapt. Was this level of overcrowding a public health crisis or a kind of unintentional efficiency? Whatever the answer, it's clear that every inch of this room has been claimed, transformed, and made meaningful by necessity. You catch your reflection in a small mirror nailed to the cupboard door. Your face is dusty, your eyes slightly red, and your shoulders hunched from the close air. But somehow, the person staring back looks settled, as if this space, with its noise and warmth and stubbornness, has made room for you too. You thank the shoemaker softly and step back through the doorway. The stairwell is waiting. You climb slowly, placing your hand on the railing worn from so many others who've held it before you. Upstairs, there's another room, another life, another story waiting to unfold in the dim yellow light. You keep climbing. The stair groans beneath you, not with complaint, exactly, but like a tired friend who's been carrying too many secrets for too many years. The second floor isn't far, but the journey feels heavier than it should. As you reach the landing, your ears fill with a new kind of sound. Splashing water, hurried footsteps, a baby laughing or screaming. It's often the same sound. There's also a persistent squeak, like someone scrubbing something with determination, and a questionable rag. You follow the sound toward the hallway, where a dim bulb flickers overhead and casts nervous shadows against the faded green walls. There's a door ajar, and past it, you glimpse the building's most curious compromise, the shared sink. A slanted, rust-ringed basin juts from the wall at waist height. Its spout drips rhythmically, every fourth drop bouncing off the side of a chipped enamel pot beneath it. A bucket sits beside it, filled halfway with grayish water. Someone's laundry, from the looks of it, shirts that once were white, now carrying the hue of experience. To your left, a young boy, maybe 10, maybe just small, for his age is standing barefoot on a crate. Hez attempting a sink bath, a Tenement classic. His shirt is off, trousers rolled down to the knees, hair already wet. He dips a rag into the cold water and flinches every time it touches his skin. He doesn't look up when you approach. This is not a new performance for him. Cold as the East River, he mutters, mostly to himself. He dips again, scrubs an armpit, shivers. Someone inside the adjacent room shouts something in Yiddish, and he responds with a half-hearted, yeah, I'm hurrying. Above the sink hangs a bar of soap tied with string, suspended like bait. The soap is cracked in the middle, its once proud square shape now reduced to something resembling a misshapen coin. The string keeps it from falling to the floor, or, more accurately, from being stolen. Soap disappears in tenements. It's not quite currency, but it's clothes. On a nearby hook, a towel drips quietly onto the floor. The wood underneath is warped and darkened from decades of such drips. Someone's tried to patch it with newspaper, but the ink has bled, forming abstract patterns underfoot. You glance upward and spot a window small, filthy, half covered with what looks like wax paper and lace. A sliver of sunlight sneaks through, highlighting the steam rising from the boy's breath. You wonder how many people have stood in exactly this spot, over how many years, scrubbing the day away while shivering. The boy finishes rinsing his face and steps down, grabbing the towel with practiced ease. As he dries himself, he looks at you and says, "There's hot water on Thursdays. Sometimes." You nod, though it's not really a conversation, it's just information passed down like a family recipe. He vanishes back through the door, leaving the basin to drip again in solitude. You turn to the left and continue down the hallway. The floorboards here tilt slightly toward the center, a slow sag in the building's spine. At your feet, you pass a rusted pot, its contents uncertain. Maybe someone left it to soak. Maybe it's a pet's water dish. Or maybe it's just forgotten. Everything in this place could be one of those three. The next door is open. You knock softly anyway, and a voice calls, "Come if you like the smell of onions." So you do. You enter into what appears to be a kitchen, but only barely. It's barely wider than a hallway and functions as three different rooms: kitchen, dining space, and bedroom. A small stove in the corner hisses softly. On top of it, a pot simmers with something thick and brown, smelling of lentils, bay leaves, and stubborn determination. The woman tending the pot doesn't turn around. She's chopping onions on a wooden board wedged between the stove and a crate of potatoes. "Don't step on the bed," she says, without looking. You glance down. Beneath your feet is a low cot, half covered in wool blankets, clearly used as both a place to sleep and to store canned goods. 2 tin cans of pickled beets rest on the pillow like silent sentinels. Behind a tattered curtain stretched between 2 coat hooks, you hear snoring. Someone sleeping middle of the day, no shame. Could be a night worker. Could be someone who gave up on daylight. The table in the center of the room is barely large enough for 2 plates. Today, it holds a sewing basket, a chipped pitcher, and a pair of socks still damp from washing. Overhead, a clothesline stretches from wall to wall, strung with undergarments and small shirts, dripping softly onto the wood floor. A framed photograph hangs near the stove. Faded and wrinkled, it shows a man in uniform standing next to a tree. You get the feeling he's not coming back, not because of war, necessarily, but because so many people in these buildings simply disappear into the city, into poverty, into work too far away to write letters. The woman finishes chopping and turns to glance at you. Her eyes are red from onions, but kind. She waves her knife vaguely and says, "Sit if you want," or stand. Everyone does. You remain standing. Historians still argue whether such kitchens were marvels of domestic creativity or symbols of desperation. One 1924 housing report called them death traps and stew pots, warning that cooking and sleeping in the same room would weaken the lungs and confuse the soul. But to the people living here, it was simply life messy, warm, and full of overlapping functions. A cat appears from nowhere, leaps onto the table, and begins licking a fork. The woman swats at it gently, muttering something in Polish. The cat ignores her. "Everyone does," she says. You thank her quietly and retreat back into the hallway. The sink is quiet now, just a slow drip. The steam is gone. Back at the staircase, you rest your hand on the railing again. It's slightly damp. From the towel? From condensation? From time? Hard to say. You pull yourself upward once more. Above you, the 3rd floor waits. Another door. Another story. Another slice of life in this teetering brick hive. The stairs creak in their usual way as you move upward, a series of long, complaining groans that sound oddly like a tired cello. The building shifts slightly with you, just a whisper, but you feel it. The air changes too, warm and dry and threaded with new smells. As you reach the 3rd floor landing, the scent of burned sugar and soap mixes with something savory, like onions just starting to brown. But there's also the unmistakable sharpness of kerosene. In tenements like this, every floor has its own perfume, a fingerprint of all the lives pressed into it. You step into the corridor. The wallpaper here is peeled back in long ribbons, revealing old plaster underneath. Names are carved into the wood trim, along the hallway, some in English, some in Cyrillic, a few in hearts. There's one that reads Rose 1919 scratched faintly into the doorframe. No one knows who she is anymore, but her name lingers, just like everything else in this building. To your right, the hallway narrows, barely wide enough to walk without brushing against the wall. The floor tilts slightly to the left, as though the entire building has settled unevenly over the decades, and indeed, it probably has. A single light bulb dangles from a cord in the ceiling, swaying gently from someone's earlier footsteps. Its light is weak but determined, casting shadows that move even when nothing else does. You pass a door with deep claw-like scratches low on the wood. Could be from a dog. Could be a child with a spoon and too much imagination. Tenements are full of both. You knock gently on the next door, one that's half open. It swings back without a sound, revealing what might be the most unusual living room you've seen yet. Inside, a soft gray light filters through a tiny window stuffed with crumpled newspaper and lace. The room is modest in size, but crammed with evidence of life. A bed, a makeshift stove, a folding chair, laundry hanging from a wire across the ceiling. And in the middle of it all, a chicken. Yes, a live chicken. It clucks gently as it paces near the bed, stepping with purpose over a worn area rug and pecking occasionally at crumbs. It's not startled by your presence. On the contrary, it seems to regard you with a kind of poultry skepticism, like a bouncer at a very exclusive, very tiny club. The room is both parlor and bedroom, both kitchen and nursery. In its current state, it might serve as an example of either resilience or madness, depending on your perspective. A low bed takes up the far wall, covered in a quilt that's clearly handmade. It's patched with bits of old shirts, stained flour sacks, and scraps of velvet. 3 people sleep there. A woman curled around a baby, and what appears to be her mother lying on her back, snoring softly with one arm thrown dramatically over her head like a retired actress. Near the window, a small crate has been turned into a table, holding a dented tin coffee pot, half a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth, and a spoon sitting in a cup of what may once have been soup. There's a bar of laundry soap on the sill next to a tomato. You don't ask why. To your right, a curtain made from stitched-together pillowcases hangs from a wire, hiding the corner of the room that must be a second sleeping area. You can just make out the lump of a mattress on the floor behind it and hear the slow, even breathing of someone still deep in sleep. There's a crate acting as a dresser, filled with clothes rolled into tight bundles. A child's schoolbook lies open atop it, its pages lined with careful, smudged cursive. A stub of pencil sits next to it, barely longer than a matchstick. Above the makeshift dresser, a shelf holds a cracked teacup, a glass rosary, and a photograph of a man in uniform, his eyes dark and serious. The photo has curled at the edges and yellowed with time. Someone has tucked a pressed flower behind the frame. The walls are lined with old newspapers, tacked up not for reading but for insulation. Headlines from 1915, 1917, and 1919 shout out wars, strikes, and storms. You spot one in a language you don't recognize, possibly Romanian. Someone has drawn little doodles between the columns in pencil. Stars, flowers, and a pair of boots. The chicken hops onto a stool and flutters its wings lazily. Beneath the stool is a saucer of water. It has a name. This chicken, you're sure of it, but no one here's awake to tell you what it is. You take a careful step farther into the room, your boot brushing a soft rug that feels worn to the threads. You hear a faint rustle and notice a little boy peeking out from behind the curtain. His hair is wild with sleep. He stares at you for a moment, then disappears again. No words exchanged, just a shared understanding that space is limited and secrets are currency. Historians still argue whether tenement living was evidence of urban failure or working class resilience. This room would make a case for both. It is impossibly cramped, undeniably uncomfortable, and yet it is alive. The people here sleep, eat, play, love, and dream inside this crooked box of plaster and wood. Everything is multifunctional. A stool is also a shelf, a crate is a closet, and the bed is a stage for both lullabies and soup spills. The chicken, somehow, is part of the equation: food security, perhaps, or just comfort in a soft, feathered form. A quiet cough from behind the curtain reminds you that you're not alone. You take one last glance around the room. The light has shifted slightly, painting long lines across the floor and casting the chicken's shadow in dramatic profile. It clucks once, as if to say, "You've seen enough." You nod to the bird respectfully and step back into the hallway. The door closes behind you with a quiet latch. Back in the corridor, everything feels slightly larger, though that's only in comparison. You're surrounded again by creaking floorboards and the distant echo of a baby crying on another floor. A radio plays faintly down the hall, the music tinny and wavering. You rest your hand on the railing and begin your climb once more. The stairs greet you with their usual groans, and above them waits another room. Another corner of this vertical village filled with surprises, sorrow, and something like joy. You climb slowly now, not because you're tired, though your legs are beginning to feel the weight of the building's century of uneven stairs, but because you've started to recognize the rhythm of this place. There's no reason to hurry. The building doesn't. The people inside certainly don't. Life in the tenement is slow not by choice, but by necessity. Each floor has its own pulse. You've learned to listen for it. The fourth floor landing greets you not with shouting or clatter, but with quiet. Not silence. No. This building never offers true silence, but a muffled hush, filled with soft sounds. The occasional thud of a broom handle against a floorboard, the creak of a rocking chair, a distant baby's cough. You pause at the landing, resting your hand on the banister. The wood here feels more worn than below, polished smooth by 100,000 hands. The banister curves slightly outward at the joint, like it's sagging under the weight of memory. The paint on the walls is mostly gone. What remains curls like dried leaves, exposing gray plaster beneath. To your left, the hallway stretches just a little longer than expected. The floorboards creak with each step you take, not just from age, but from a kind of reluctance, as if they're holding secrets and don't want to give them up easily. One of the doors here has a curtain nailed across the top half, a makeshift screen that flutters slightly with each footstep you take. A bit of warm light glows behind it. You approach, knock softly, and wait. A woman's voice, calm, low, almost amused, calls out, "If you don't mind the smell of onions, you're welcome." You push gently, and the door opens. Inside, the room is unexpectedly deep. A long space with a sagging ceiling, and walls half covered in fabric-lace scraps, wool squares, and thin shawls pinned like insulation. 2 beds are pressed against opposite walls. A single stove squats in one corner, its pipe snaking upward like a stubborn plant. In front of the stove kneels a woman, pouring hot water from a dented kettle into a large enamel basin. Steam rises in lazy spirals, mixing with the room's layered Sensonians, boiled potatoes, soap, and something slightly sweet, like burnt sugar or old raisins. To your right, one of the beds is hidden behind a curtain made from a moth-eaten bedsheet and a piece of burlap. It's strung on twine and sags slightly in the middle. From behind it, you hear the soft murmur of a voice, maybe a prayer or just talking in sleep. A baby coughs once, then settles. The other bed is neatly made, though the quilt is clearly handmade, squares of whatever fabric was available stitched together in uneven rows. Sitting on the edge of the mattress is a man with wire-rimmed glasses bent over a narrow writing desk. He scribbles with quiet intensity, pausing only to dip his pen in an inkwell the size of a thimble. He writes letters, the woman says, not turning around, to his brother in Minsk. Every week. No reply in 3 years. The man looks up and gives you a faint nod, then returns to his writing. His lips move silently with each word he commits to paper. A child sits on the floor near the window, barefoot, knees pulled up to their chest, and hums softly as they play with scraps of fabric. They're arranging squares in a pattern only they can see. The hum is tuneless but peaceful. A candle burns nearby, its wax dripping onto a cracked saucer. You glance toward the window and notice something strange. Instead of curtains, the entire frame is stuffed with old newspapers, wadded tightly into every gap, layer upon layer. The outermost layer is Yiddish print, curled and browned from age. You lean closer. Headlines from 1916 and 1919 speak of strikes, storms, and silent films. One paper is folded to show an editorial cartoon of a man chasing his own hat in the wind. Insulation, the woman explains, still crouched by the basin, keeps the draft out. He reads them when he can't sleep. She gestures again toward the man at the desk, says the print smells like home. The child looks up from their patchwork and says, "Do you think snow gets tired of falling?" You pause, then smile. "No. I think snow just forgets how to stop." They seem to like that answer and return to their humming. On a narrow shelf above the man's desk sits a teacup with a cracked rim, a silver spoon, 2 buttons, and a photograph of a man in uniform. The photo is faded to sepia, and the man's expression is serious, almost afraid. A dried violet has been tucked into the corner of the frame. You sense it hasn't been touched in years. Historians still argue whether tenement homes like this one created community or simply compressed loneliness. Was the closeness comforting or claustrophobic? Did the necessity of proximity bring people together, or just give them less room to hide their frustration? In this room, at least, the answer seems gentle. There's something here beyond survival. Not luxury. Certainly not ease, but presence, attention, quiet rituals that hold the day together. The man finishes writing, folds the letter neatly, and places it beside a small saucer holding a coin and a postage stamp. He nods again, then picks up another sheet of paper. The pen scratches on. The woman rises from the floor, drying her hands on a flour sack towel. She offers a small smile and says, "Thank you for stepping quietly." You nod. You've learned by now nothing in a tenement should be done in a rush, and nothing should be done loud. You step backward into the hallway. The door closes softly behind you, the curtain fluttering once like a sigh. Back on the landing, the building's hum resume spikes clicking, wind moaning faintly, the whisper of a violin tuning somewhere far off. You grip the railing again, the wood still warm from the hundreds of others who've used it today. Up you go. Another floor. Another story. Another pocket of memory, waiting behind a crooked door. You climb with care now. Not just because the stairs on the 4th floor are less forgiving. Each step seems to question your motives, shifting and sighing beneath your weight. but because you've come to appreciate the rhythm of the building. There's a tempo to tenement life. Slow, heavy, thoughtful. Everything here moves like it has somewhere to be, but doesn't mind being late. As you step onto the fifth floor landing, the world narrows again. This is the top floor, and it feels like it. The ceilings seem lower, the walls closer, and the quiet is different. It's not peaceful, it's taut, like a breath held too long. Faint light filters through a single cracked window at the end of the hall, illuminating motes of dust that float like slow snowfall. There's a door here, set slightly ajar. You knock anyway, and from within comes a dry, amused voice. If you read Yiddish, or pretend well enough, come in. You push the door gently. It swings open with a groan, like an old man waking from a nap. The room inside is narrow, but long, the kind of space that wasn't designed to be lived in, but has been lived in anyway. It smells like old paper, warm ink, and a little bit of tea. Newspapers cover everything, bundled in stacks, taped over windows, folded into the cracks of the floorboards. A few are bundled with twine and stacked like firewood near the stove. Others have been carefully preserved in clear sleeves, hung on the wall like portraits. Mind the columns, the voice says. They're stacked alphabetically, not chronologically. That's important. You turn and see him. A wiry man with sharp eyes, ink-stained fingers, and a beard that's turned mostly gray, except for a stubborn black streak along his jaw. He wears a patched robe, slippers, and the confidence of someone who has outlived most of the people who told him to be realistic. Sit, he says, gesturing toward an overturned apple crate padded with a folded coat. You're not interrupting anything important, unless you consider arguing with 1907 editorial boards important. I do, but you don't have to. You sit. He pours hot water into 2 cracked mugs, dropping a sliver of dried lemon peel into each. Time ran out last week, he mutters. Lemon's bitter, but it still pretends to be civilized. Around the room, headlines whisper to you. Labor strike in Brooklyn. Turns violent. Bread prices soar again. New theater opens on Grand Street. Missing child found safe. Each newspaper feels like a memory that forgot to fade. On the windowsill, layered behind the glass and old lace, a page from 1915 reports on a factory fire. The ink has turned sepia, and you wonder how many fingers once traced that headline, searching for names. I keep them, he says, handing you your tea. Not because they're rare, but because they remember. He walks to the far end of the room, lifting the edge of a threadbare curtain to reveal a cot tucked into an alcove. Even the cot is lined with newsprint, pressed flat beneath the blanket. Insulation, he offers, better than feathers, and cheaper than betrayal. He chuckles. It's unclear whether he's joking. There's a shelf above the cot. On it, a tin of buttons, a chipped cup, a prayer book with frayed corners, and a photograph of a girl holding a violin. You recognize her eyes. My Miriam, he says, catching your gaze. Lives in Jersey now. Teacher. 2 boys, one with too much hair and no patience. He doesn't smile, but his voice softens. Next to the shelf, pinned on the wall, is a Yiddish newspaper clipping about a street performance in the Lower East Side. Someone circled the headline and drawn a tiny violin next to it in pencil. You sip the tea. It's strong and strange, bitter, with hints of something floral underneath. It tastes like memory. He pulls a small metal box from beneath the cot. Inside, 3 fountain pens, 2 folded letters, a pressed flower, and a subway token from 1908. Am writing something, he tells you. A history of forgetting. or remembering. I haven't decided. You don't ask for clarification. He wouldn't give it. Historians still argue whether tenement intellectuals like him were torchbearers or relics. Some say they preserved culture in exile. Others say they retreated too far inward. But here he is, alive, alert, surrounded by ink and words, preserving a world no one else remembers. He pulls a sheet of paper from a stack beside him. Did you know, he says, the first Yiddish newspaper in America was printed in a laundry basement. Every page hung to dry like linens. That's how we built literacy, with clothespins. He chuckles again. Makes you wonder what else we've hung out to dry. You finish your tea. It leaves a faint ring on the crate beside you. He notices and places an old coaster under your cup with exaggerated care. We pretend, he says, because pretending keeps the place from falling down. You nod. As you rise to leave, he returns to his writing desk, dipping his pen into an old inkwell and dragging it across the page with slow precision. Behind you, the newspapers rustle faintly in the draft. They crackle like fire, or like applause. You step out into the hallway. The air feels lighter now, the floorboards softer. Ahead of you, the stairs lead not to another apartment, but to the roof. You place your hand on the banister and begin to climb once more, toward the top of the world, or at least the top of this one. The stairs above the 5th floor aren't built for comfort. They're steeper, narrower, and covered in a fine film of city dust that seems to renew itself daily. As you ascend toward the roof, every step beneath your foot offers a different protest. Some groan, like old men with bad knees. Others let out dry wheezes that sound suspiciously like sighs. You reach the top with a soft push against a door whose paint has been worn thin by hands, wind, and time. The handle is cold, stiff, and slightly bent, but it gives way eventually, swinging open with a groan loud enough to announce you to the sky. And suddenly, there it is, the roof. You step out into light, real light, open sky. The air shifts instantly. It's cooler here, less sour than the stairwells, less seasoned with coal smoke and onions. There's a freshness to it, even if it's tinged with chimney soot, wet laundry, and the far-off perfume of bread baking 4 blocks away. The first thing you notice is the quiet, not silence, never silence, but the kind of muffled, expansive hush that feels impossible on a city block. You can still hear the rumble of carts on the street below, the faint whistles of a peddler, a distant piano, but it all sounds far away, like it's happening in another world entirely. You look around. The rooftop is large and plain, but every corner is alive. A line of laundry stretches across the width of the building: shirts, skirts, socks, long underwear, even one pair of pants that looks like it's had too many owners. Clothespins clatter gently in the wind. One shirt flaps so aggressively you half expect it to fly away. The edges of the rooftop are ringed with bricks blackened from decades of chimney smoke. Someone's carved initials into one RS plus LM. 1920, a small, hopeful act of permanence in a place where everything else is borrowed. You take a few slow steps forward. The tar beneath your feet is warm from the sun, soft in places, cracked in others. You pass an old wooden crate turned upside down, with a rag thrown over it, a makeshift stool or table, depending on the hour. Near one corner, a little boy sits with his back against the chimney stack, knees tucked up, an apple in his hand, and a paring knife balanced on his knee. He's not older than 9 or 10. He looks up, squints at you, then gestures vaguely to a nearby spot. "Don't sit on that edge," he says. "The bricks are loose. They wobble if you breathe too hard." You nod and settle a few feet back from the edge, lowering yourself to the tarred surface. It's warm against your back. "Wind smells like onions sometimes," he adds after a moment. "Sometimes like the East River. Depends what mood it's in." He slices the apple carefully, the blade dull but practiced. The peel comes off in long curls, which he tosses one by one over the side. They flutter down like red-rimmed butterflies, then vanish. Behind you, a door creaks open again, and a girl appears, barefoot, hair wild, carrying a pillow and what might be a curtain. She doesn't say anything, just walks to the sunniest spot she can find and lies down flat, face to the sky. Within moments, she's humming. A low, repetitive tune, with no real melody, like something her grandmother might have sung while mending socks. The boy doesn't react. This is routine. This is roof life. You take it in. The sun, the chill in the wind, the whisper of a pigeon landing nearby with a soft thud. In the far corner, beside a rusted pipe, someone has started a garden of sorts. 3 tin cans sit in a crooked line, one holding a thin stem with 2 honest leaves. The others are filled with gray dirt and hope. One has a sign stuck in it made from a matchstick and torn paper. Basil, maybe. There's a small wooden box beside the cans, worn smooth and tied shut with string. Carved into the lid, private. If found, read slowly. You don't open it. You don't need to. You hear laughter far below, filtered through floors and windows. The city is always laughing, even if it sounds a little tired. The boy beside you says, "I saw a man fall asleep up here once. Woke up covered in laundry." You smile. He finishes his apple and flicks the core toward a nearby bucket. Misses. Doesn't care. "You can hear the fireworks from Coney Island," he says. "On clear nights, not loud, just enough to make you wonder if it's thunder or dreams." Historians still argue whether tenement rooftops were used more for escape or necessity. Were they extensions of overcrowded apartments, or places people came to breathe, to think, to remember what the sky looked like? The truth, as always, is both. This roof is a second home, a third space, a moment of pause. It's where secrets are whispered, games are played, arguments settled, kisses exchanged, tears wiped away when no one's looking. It's the highest floor and the farthest edge. It's freedom, in a 4-story sort of way. A pigeon waddles past your shoe, head bobbing, unimpressed. The girl's humming shifts into something that might be a lullaby. The boy begins peeling a second apple. You lie back now, arms behind your head, staring up into the stretch of sky that feels suddenly vast and kind. The sun warms your face. The wind brushes your cheeks. For a moment, the city disappears. You rise after a while, slowly, quietly. You don't want to disturb the hum of the rooftop, the rhythm of its breath. You nod to the boy. He nods back, distracted by peel number 3. The stairs wait. Life continues below. You pull open the door and begin your descent downward, into the rooms, the heat, the noise, and the stories still waiting to unfold. You descend from the rooftop, with the sun still warming your back, though the light feels less free the lower you go. Each stair creaks louder now, as if reluctant to return you to the layers of brick and breath that make up the heart of this tenement. As you pass the 5th floor, the air thickens. By the time your boots meet the landing between the 3rd and 4th floors, you sense a shift not just in temperature, but in tone. Here, the air feels stiller, heavier. Not the pleasant weight of a full room, but something different. You notice a narrow hallway, veering off from the main staircase, narrower than the others, framed by plaster walls with jagged cracks and a sagging curtain tacked to a door frame like an afterthought. It almost doesn't look like part of the building anymore. You follow it. At the end, there's a door with no number, no name, just a square of wax paper covering what used to be a window, taped there with care and a little desperation. A rusted horseshoe hangs above the frame. You knock gently. Nothing. Then a voice low, tired calls from within. It sticks. Push harder. So you do. The door groans open, hinges stiff with age, and there you are in the rear tenement. This is the building's forgotten limb, the part added on, subdivided, built into, and over. If the front of the building is the face it shows to the world, this is the back of the head quiet, shadowed, and full of old thoughts. The room is long and narrow, lit by a single oil lamp perched on a crate beside a sagging mattress. The walls are bare brick, darkened with time and patched with squares of cloth, newspaper, and curiously cardboard from a biscuit tin. The ceiling sags in the middle like a held breath. There's a table in the center of the room, barely wide enough for 2 plates. On it sits a cold coffee pot, a candle stump melted into a teacup, and a child's doll, head carefully wrapped in muslin. One eye is missing, its smile oddly intact. A woman sits beside the table, peeling root vegetables into a chipped enamel basin. She doesn't look up at first, just says, "You can sit if you don't mind company that talks to itself." You glance to the far side of the room. A man is lying on a mattress tucked under the window, not a real window, just a cutout filled with cloudy glass. He holds a book above his face, squinting to read in the low light. His lips move with each word, but no sound comes out. Behind a curtain made of mismatched fabric panels, some plaid, some lace, one printed with dancing geese, you hear a faint rustling, then the soft cough of someone not quite asleep, not quite awake. This place feels like a pocket inside the building, folded in on itself. The walls are close. The floor is uneven. Even the ceiling seems to lean inward, as though it's listening. Above the mattress, a single shelf holds a teacup filled with buttons, a matchbox, 2 used stamps, and a crumpled photo. A young girl in a wide hat, grinning as though nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. The woman finishes peeling and wipes her hands on her apron. She gives you a quick glance. "We used to live up front. 3rd floor. Had a window that opened. But the rent?" She trails off, shrugs. "Here's cheaper. Nobody wants to live in the back." She pours the peeled vegetables into a pot that's been blackened from years of use and sets it on a tiny stovetop, really just a burner balanced on bricks. The man with the book coughs and speaks for the first time. Cold in winter. Quiet, though. He smiles faintly. Too quiet sometimes. You look around. There are signs of life everywhere, but they're subdued. A broom leans against the wall, bristles worn thin. A pair of shoes has been placed carefully side by side near the foot of the mattress, soles split but polished. A cracked mirror rests on the floor, reflecting the flicker of the candle like a trembling flame. The back of the tenement was never meant to be home. It was a workaround, an architectural loophole, a developer's shrug. Historians still argue whether these rear apartments were built out of greed or necessity. Some say they were temporary, intended to tide families over. Others claim they were permanent, by design, Just another way to keep people out of sight. But for the people here, debates don't matter. The walls are close, yes. The light is poor. The air smells faintly of damp wood and boiled potatoes. But there is food. There is warmth. There is enough room to lie down. You notice a pencil drawing tape to the wall. A city skyline drawn in a child's hand. One tower leans heavily to the side, and the sun has a frown. It's signed Ben, age 6. The woman sees you looking. He drew that when the upstairs pipe burst and rained on his bed. She lights another candle and places it near the wall. The glow softens the lines of the room, makes it feel a little less like a cellar and a little more like a pocket of something tender. The man on the mattress lowers his book. We all got here from somewhere else, he says. Some came for work. Some came to disappear. He nods slowly. We stayed because the walls don't ask questions. You sit down for a while, letting the silence take hold. There's no urgency here. Nothing needs to happen. The walls hum gently. The pot begins to bubble. The curtain rustles once, then stills. Eventually, you stand. You nod your thanks. The woman nods back. The man waves you off with a flick of his book. You slip back into the narrow hallway, your shoulders brushing each side. You pass the peeling wallpaper, the sagging arch, the rusty nail sticking out like a question mark. The stairwell reappears, and with it, a different kind of noise. You take one last glance behind you. The back room, dim and forgotten, still glows faintly through the cracked door. Then you descend again, toward voices, toward warmth, toward the stories still waiting below. You descend another flight, the wood beneath your feet letting out a tired sigh with every step, as if the building itself is growing weary of your exploring. The sounds shift subtly on this floorless creaking, more clinking. A spoon against a cup, a foot tapping softly, and then something unexpected. Music. Not a gramophone's polished hum, but a raw, hesitant tune, thin as string and just as fragile. A violin, perhaps, learning to find its way through a melody it only half remembers. The notes wobble, but press on with determination. You follow. The hallway on the 3rd floor smells faintly of tea leaves and boiled fabric. You walk slowly, the melody growing louder with each step until you reach a doorway held open by a broom, jammed beneath the knob. Warm light spills out, golden and soft, not the flickering glow of a candle or the blue sputter of gaslight. Someone here has electricity, at least for now. You peer inside. It's a small room, barely wider than 2 beds, pressed side by side, but it pulses with life. In the corner, a boy of about 12 sits hunched on a rickety stool, a too large violin tucked under his chin. His fingers hesitate before each note, the bow gliding in fits and starts. Hez practicing, but not alone. Across from him, perched on a low bench, covered with a floral cushion that's been patched and repatched beyond recognition, sits an older woman, his grandmother, likely. Her gray hair is pinned into a bun that gave up hours ago, and her shawl hangs askew over one shoulder. In one hand she knits. In the other, she waves a long needle in time with the music, conducting with fierce concentration. Too fast, she mutters. You're not being chased by Cossacks. It's Allegro, Baba, the boy replies, frowning. Yes, and Allegro does not mean stampede. They don't notice you right away, and you hesitate. This feels like a moment you weren't meant to see. But then she looks up, squints, and waves you in. Come, sit, sit. if you can listen without interrupting. No clapping. No sleeping unless the music allows it. You find a chair beside the wall, its cushions stacked with neatly folded dish towels. You shift them gently and sit, the wood creaking in complaint. The room is alive with contradiction, chaos and comfort, clutter and calm. Books line the walls, some shelved upright, others stacked horizontally in dangerous-looking towers. A porcelain teacup holds sewing pins, and a bent coat hanger serves as a music stand. The floor is layered with overlapping rugs, none of them matching. A samovar puffs quietly in the corner, steam coiling up like a silk ribbon. The boy resumes playing. The melody is mournful this time, slower, with fewer wrong notes. It sounds like a lullaby translated through memory. His grandmother hums softly along, tapping her heel against the wood floor, knitting needles clicking in rhythm. When he finishes, he looks to her. She pauses, frowns thoughtfully, then says, "Not terrible." The boy grins, pretending not to care. He sets the violin down and stretches, fingers cramped. Historians still argue whether music in tenement life was resistance or nostalgia. Was it a way for immigrants to hold on to the old world or a desperate leap into the new one? Some say it was escapism. Others say it was an anchor. In this room, it's both. The grandmother rises slowly, joints popping like old furniture, and shuffles to the kitchenette early just a counter, a single electric burner, and a sink. She ladles something thick and golden from a pot into small ceramic bowls. "Soup," she says. Not fancy, but it's honest. You accept a bowl, nodding thanks. It tastes of garlic and potatoes, with a hint of something sweet parsnip maybe, or carrot. The kind of flavor that only comes from food, made when money is low, but care is high. The boy stirs his own bowl absently, spoon trailing lazy circles. "I want to be good," he says quietly. His grandmother, busy wiping the ladle clean, pauses. "You already are. Now you must become excellent." That part takes time and sore fingers. On the wall above the stove hangs a photo, a black and white portrait of a man holding a violin, wearing a stiff collar and a solemn smile. A child's handwriting below it reads, "Uncle Yashafer's chair, last train." You don't ask for details. Nearby, a faded newspaper clipping is pinned with 2 buttons. It shows a group of musicians gathered in a square, instruments in hand, mouths open in song. The caption, "Street Symphony, East Side, Youths Revive Folk Traditions." The grandmother sees you reading. That was before the bakery closed. They played outside every Saturday, made people cry on purpose. The boy rolls his eyes. "She tells that story every week." "Yes," she replies, "because it's worth remembering. Not everything old is useless." A breeze stirs the lace curtain over the window, revealing a sliver of twilight outside. The city is still alive beyond these walls, but inside, the room holds its own kind of pulse. The boy picks up his violin again and begins tuning with quiet focus. His fingers are raw, red in the joints, but steady. Above him, on the wall, another handwritten sign in looping blue ink reads, "Play like someone needs it." He begins again. The same lullaby as before, but smoother now, with pauses that feel intentional. The melody curls gently through the room like rising steam. You lean back in your chair, soup warming your hands, and listen, not to perfection, but to effort, to continuity, to the stubborn grace of trying again. And when the music ends, the grandmother whispers, "That's it." No applause, just the clink of spoons and the sigh of a satisfied room. You thank them softly and rise. She nods, already reaching for another skein of yarn. The boy fiddles with his strings, humming to himself, eyes still in the music. As you step back into the hallway, the warm light spills behind you like a promise. The door clicks shut. The melody lingers, and you move on. The stairwell seems to grow dimmer as you descend to the second floor. The light thins, as though the air itself has decided to stop reflecting it properly. A musty scent rises to greet you, not unpleasant, but dense. It's the smell of plaster, of damp wood, of rust and aging laundry soap. The kind of smell that only appears when a building has soaked up a century of people living too close together. You pause briefly on the landing. The second floor has a different rhythm, not as musical as the one above, nor as domestic as the third. It's quieter here, but not with the peaceful hush of a library or church. It's a deliberate quiet, a concentration, as if everyone behind the doors is busy doing something that requires their full attention. And then you hear it. Tap, scratch. Pause. Tap, scratch, scratch. A slow, repetitive sound, delicate and precise, like someone writing with a broken quill or sharpening a toothpick. You follow it, letting the soft rhythm guide you through the corridor. The doors are closed tightly, paint chipped along the edges. There's no sound of conversation, no laughter, no clinking dishes. Just the small, stubborn noise of persistence. It leads you to a door with a clouded pane of glass set high in the frame. No number. A crooked strip of cardboard is wedged beneath the door to block the drafter, perhaps to keep out the rats. You knock. The tapping stops. A few seconds pass. Then, you can come in. Don't touch anything sharp. You enter. The room is narrow, long, and dim. The only window faces an alley wall so close that light barely filters through. But a desk lamp, an ancient bulbous thing with a green shade and a frayed cord, casts a warm circle of light on a cluttered workspace. In the middle of it sits a man, hunched forward, his face nearly pressed to the tiny mechanical pieces scattered across the table. His round glasses magnify his eyes to the size of small apples. A headlamp is strapped to his forehead, casting an intense spotlight on the gear assembly beneath his hands. He doesn't look up. Don't sit on the left. That's where I keep my regrets. You glance over to see a pile of tangled wires, broken springs, and a cracked photograph of a woman holding an umbrella in front of a shop. A small plaque beneath it reads, "Lena, who warned me about everything." You sit carefully on a stool by the wall, shoving aside a stack of cracked radios. The walls are lined with shelves, but none hold books. Instead, you see canisters filled with screws, old biscuit tins repurposed for metal shavings, and jam jars brimming with tiny gears no bigger than poppy seeds. "I fix what can't be replaced," he says, still not looking at you. Watches mostly, but also fans, record players, sewing machines, and occasionally hope. He lifts a pair of tweezers, so fine they look like surgical instruments, and plucks a tiny spring from a velvet-lined case. You watch as he leans in, tongue pressed to his top lip in concentration, and eases it into the belly of a wristwatch that's clearly older than both of you. "There," he mutters. "You see that? It wants to live." You nod, though you're not sure what that was. On a shelf behind him, a whole collection of timepieces ticks and talks out of sync. Some whir gently. Others hiccup and pause, then start again. Together, they make a sound, like a room full of whispering ghosts. "I used to have a shop," he says, voice low and steady. Down near Orchard Street. But the rent got clever. So I moved the shop here. Or I moved in with the shop. The distinctions mostly for the postman. He finally glances at you. Eyes magnified comically behind the thick lenses. People don't notice clocks until they stop working. That's when the panic starts. Meetings are missed. Bread is overbaked. Babies arrive before fathers do. He chuckles dryly. Time's only polite when it's on your side. On the wall to your right is a corkboard covered in yellowing slips of paper. Notes in various handwritings. Please fix by Sunday. Wedding on Monday. Lost minutes every hour. Can relate. Ticking like it's haunted. Is that normal? You ask if he ever turns anything away. Only cuckoo clocks, he says flatly. They lie with enthusiasm. He sets the watch aside and pours 2 cups of tea from a thermos so dented it looks like it's been through several wars. The tea is strong and slightly bitter, with a whisper of clove. You sip gratefully. He leans back and rubs his temples. I used to think he'd invent something big. A clock that knows when you're lying. A radio that only plays the truth. Something brilliant. But now I fix what others throw away. It's less glorious. More honest. Historians still debate whether tenement inventors contributed meaningfully to the technological leaps of the 20th century, or were simply eccentric hobbyists in overalls. Some argue that men like the stinkerers in rooms full of dust and wire laid the groundwork for real progress piece by piece. Others claim they were only delaying the inevitable, obsolescence. The man shrugs as if he's heard it all. I like machines that are a little broken, he says. They remind me of people. Still ticking. Still trying. He gestures to a cabinet in the corner. That's the graveyard. The ones that don't want to be fixed. I keep them around, just in case they change their minds. You notice a mechanical bird on the top shelf, a wind-up sparrow with chipped paint and a missing eye. It's perched on a wooden stand with the words, whistles, when lonely, etched into the base. You ask if it still works. Only on Tuesdays, he says, and never when you want it to. You both fall into silence again, the room filled only with the asynchronous ticking of his collection and the soft whistle of steam escaping a cracked radiator. Eventually, he returns to the desk and begins carefully reassembling a broken metronome. The beat, once erratic, begins to steady, back and forth, like a heartbeat learning its purpose again. You finish your tea, stand, and thank him. He waves you off without turning. Come back if your watch starts lying to you. Happens more often than you'd think. You exit the room, slowly, closing the door behind you with a soft click. The hallway feels different, now less quiet, more alive. You descend again, carrying the scent of metal and clove, and the memory of clocks that still want to be heard. You reach the base of the stairs, the ground floor now familiar in the rhythm of its creaks and groans. The stairwell has grown more intimate as you descended, less a public space and more a collection of memories held in old wood and plaster. And as your foot hits the last step, you catch a sound, faint but certain. Not a radio, not conversation. It's breathing, steady, gentle, and somehow multiplied. The hallway is dusky, lit only by a single bare bulb halfway down. You follow the sound and the scent that floats with it. Lavender, soap, something faintly sweet and undeniably human. There's a door on your right, painted in peeling layers of sky blue and sunflower yellow, like someone tried to bottle summer and gave up halfway. There's no apartment number. Instead, the front is covered with children's drawing scats, houses, crooked smiles, and suns with faces. The tape is curling on some corners, but the paper still clings. You knock gently. The door creaks open just far enough for a face to appear. A small woman, hair in a tight gray bun, eyes sharp despite the oversized glasses. She peers at you as if measuring your weight in kindness. "You're not the new nurse," she says, matter of fact. "But never mind. Come in if your shoes are dry." You step inside. The room is small, impossibly so. Every object seems to have been pressed into a corner or layered over something else. It's more nest than home. Piles of folded laundry double as footstools. A wash tub has become a table. A cracked mirror leans over a wash basin with chipped enamel, showing only half a reflection, but a good half. In one corner stands an old dresser, white paint flaking off, handles replaced with loops of ribbon. But it's what's in the dresser that catches your breath. 3 open drawers, lined with folded towels and blankets, hold 3 sleeping children, each curled like commas in the space. Yes, sleeping in drawers. Better than the floor, the woman says plainly, noticing your look. Takes up less room, and they feel like they're in caves. Children like caves. You nod slowly, still absorbing the sight. The children are of different ages, likely between 2 and 6. Their tiny chests rise and fall in quiet synchrony. One child clutches a threadbare sock like a teddy bear. Another has a spoon under her pillow. "I call them my drawerlings," the woman adds, almost proudly. "Their mothers work at the shirtwaist factory, long shifts. I keep them for the night and part of the morning. Sometimes longer if someone gets sick. The air is warm, not stifling, but dense with human presence. A kettle steams gently on the stove. Somewhere, a clock ticks slowly. You take a seat at the only clear space on a bench draped in old scarves. They come from different families. These 3, she says, pouring you a chipped mug of tea that smells faintly of mint and something medicinal. Cousins, technically, but by now, they're more like a single unit. If one starts crying, the others follow, like ducks. The woman moves carefully but swiftly, checking the corners of each drawer, tucking blankets, adjusting a dangling foot. She touches their foreheads with the back of her hand, practiced, precise. "I write everything down," she says, pointing to a ledger open on the nearby shelf. "Feeding times. Who bit who. Whether the soup was finished or just swirled. The mothers don't ask, but I think they appreciate it." You peer at the open page. Each entry is dated, carefully penned in tidy script. Mina had nightmare. Sang her redbird song. Sammy refuses carrots unless mashed. Issa wet the bed again, hide the spoons. The page is humorous and heartbreaking all at once. She offers you a biscuit, dry and sweet, pressed flat like it was once under a book. You chew in silence, watching as she gently rocks the 3rd drawer, soothing a child who started to stir. "You'd be surprised how much you can do with a dresser," she says. "It's a bed, a cradle, a bookshelf when they're awake. Drawer 3 gets the stories. Drawer 1 gets the night songs. Drawer 2 has the best ventilation." You smile, almost afraid to laugh too loud, and wake the children. Historians still debate whether tenement children were stunted or strengthened by the harshness of their environment. Did poverty rob them of innocence, or did it build the kind of adaptability that wealth often cannot teach? The woman in front of you would likely say it's the wrong question altogether. "Children don't care about politics," she says, as if reading your thoughts. They care about full bellies and warm hands. You give them those, and they'll grow. She rises with a slight grunt and moves toward the stove, ladling a thick soup into a bowl. The scent of barley, carrots, and something smoky fills the room. We eat early, she explains, so the smell fades before bedtime. Strong smells make for restless dreams. You sip your tea slowly, letting the sound of the quiet breathing lull your own thoughts. There's a photo taped above the dresser. A woman holding 3 children on her lap. A note beside it says, "For Auntie Rehu made sleep a safe thing." You ask if that's her. She nods. My sister took the photo before she left for Pittsburgh. She swore she'd come back, still swearing. One of the children shifts, eyes flickering open for a moment, then closing again. The woman hushes them with a low hum, something wordless and ancient. I tell them stories, she says, not the kind from books. Ones I remember from when I was a girl. One about a cat who had too many socks. One about a ghost that lived in a teapot. They don't need sense, just rhythm. You imagine the stories echoing through the drawers like lullabies trapped in wood grain. She watches you finish your tea, then rises to collect the mug. Come back if you ever need a quiet place to think, she says, or if you find an extra pillow. Drawer 4 is waiting. You step into the hallway again, the air cooler now, but your chest still warm. The door clicks shut behind you, muffling the soft hum of lullabies and slow, even breathing. And onward you go. The hallway narrows as you approach the apartment at the very back, the air taking on a thick, heavy quality that's hard to place. There's no natural light back here, just the flicker of a single wall sconce, buzzing faintly like a tired wasp. The wallpaper has all but surrendered to time, peeling in places to reveal the raw plaster underneath, which itself has started to crack and buckle. The floorboards moan underfoot, not just from age, but perhaps in protest of what you're about to encounter. You stop in front of a door that has no number. The wood is scuffed near the bottom, as though someone or something has been scratching at it. A note is pinned at an angle just above the handle, scribbled in blocky cursive, "Do not knock loudly. Nervous teeth inside." You hesitate, then knock softly. After a moment, you hear footsteps, a shuffle, a clink, then what sounds like a drawer being hastily closed. The door swings open part way, revealing a narrow-eyed man in his 50s, with rolled-up sleeves, a loosened tie, and an apron streaked with something that might be coffee or iodine. His hair is combed with uneven conviction, and his eyebrows arch suspiciously as he inspects you. "You're early," he says. You open your mouth to respond, but he waves you in anyway. The room you enter is a curious hybrid of domestic life and medical fantasy. In one corner stands a cot, neatly made, but clearly unused. A wash basin sits beside it, cluttered with shaving tools, a bottle of witch hazel, and what appears to be a spoon bent into the shape of a dental mirror. The centerpiece of the room, however, is impossible to miss. A battered barber's chair, perched atop 2 wooden crates to give it extra height, draped in a white cloth that has seen better and cleaner days. Above it swings a hanging lamp, possibly borrowed from a theater stage, casting a spotlight on a tray of tools beside the chair. You count 3 sets of pliers, 2 long metal picks, a hand drill, and what you sincerely hope is not a bone saw. "Welcome to my practice," he says, motioning to the setup like a proud curator. "Dr. Paul Mirsky, tooth extraction, minor repairs, unlicensed advice." He grins. A few of his own teeth are visibly fake, slightly too white, slightly too square, and set at angles that suggest they were installed in a hurry. You ask him how long he's been doing this. Here? About 8 years. Before that, I worked out of a barber shop in Flatbush. Before that, I assisted my uncle back in Krakow. He once pulled a tooth from a horse and then used the same tool on the mare. We were very democratic that way. He gestures toward a wooden cabinet labeled, in chalk, not actual medicine. Inside, you see bottles of clove oil, menthol rub, a tin of numbing powder, and a flask that smells suspiciously of brandy. You hear a groan from the hallway. "That'll be my 3 gars," he mutters. Before long, a young man in suspenders enters, hand pressed to his cheek. Mirsky ushers him in without so much as a hello. The patient sinks into the chair, wincing as he goes. "You again," Mirsky sighs. "Didn't I warn you about the penny candies?" The young man groans something unintelligible. "You want the good clove oil or the discount version?" Mirsky asks, already dabbing gauze. The procedure begins quickly, and frankly, with surprising efficiency. Mirsky hums as he works, occasionally muttering things like "that's," "a stubborn little incisor," and just a whisper of blood. Nothing dramatic. His assistant is nowhere to be seen, and you realize with a mild start that you are the assistant now. "Hold this," he says, handing you a small tin of cotton balls. You do as you're told. The patient groans. Mirsky reassures him with gentle sarcasm, and within minutes, the tooth is out, twirling delicately between a pair of well-worn forceps. "Like fishing in a barrel filled with molasses," he says, examining the tooth like a jeweler. "Not bad. Still got the root." He deposits the tooth in a small wooden box labeled "Testimonials." As the patient stumbles out, clutching a cloth to his mouth and mumbling his thanks, Mirsky finally sits down with you at the wobbly table by the wall. He pours tea from a kettle you hadn't noticed, and it smells earthy chamomile with a hint of cloves. "You'd be surprised how many come to me instead of the hospital," he says. "They'd rather face me and a pair of sterilized pliers than deal with paperwork and shame." Historians still debate the role of underground medicine in early 20th century immigrant communities. Were these street doctors saviors or charlatans? Did they ease suffering or prolong it? In places like this tenement, where official help was scarce and mistrust was common, people turned to whoever offered the gentlest hand and the fastest relief. "I don't pretend to know everything," Mirsky says, sipping his tea. "But I know how to look someone in the eye and tell them it's going to be okay. That's more than most can say." He rises, stretches, and opens a drawer full of tiny glass jars, each holding a tooth. "Don't worry. I clean them. Some folks like to keep them as souvenirs. Others think it's bad luck to throw them away." You ask if he ever wanted to be a real dentist. He smiles. "This is real. Just because I didn't get a degree doesn't mean I don't help people." Some folks go their whole lives pulling teeth and never learn how to hold a person's hand during it. On the wall above the chair is a framed sign. "Pain is temporary. Shame lasts longer. Brush often." You finish your tea as he prepares for the next patienta woman with a scarf tied tight over her jaw, already bracing for what's to come. You thank him for letting you watch. He nods without looking back, already focused on the next task. As you step out into the hall again, the door clicking shut behind you, you can still hear the soft buzz of the hanging lamp, the clink of metal instruments, and the quiet determination of a man doing his best with whatever tools he has. You continue on, one careful step at a time. You take a deep breath as you leave the hush of the hallway behind. The air is starting to shift, now less dank and coal-heavy, more fragrant and alive. You notice a warm, sweet smell drifting toward you from the far end of the corridor. It's rich, with notes of wine, yeast, and a hint of vinegar. The scent clings to the wallpaper, which is puckered and brown near the ceiling, like it's been breathing in steam for decades. You follow your nose. The door you approach isn't fully closed. A wedge of cardboard props it open just wide enough for the scent to escape. On the knob hangs a string of garlic cloves and what looks like a red ribbon tied into a clumsy bow. You knock anyway. A muffled voice from inside calls out, "If you're the landlord, the leak fixed itself. If you're anyone else, come in." You push the door gently. Inside, you step into a warm fog of humidity and comfort. The room is dim, lit mostly by a bare bulb over the sink, and a line of sunlight leaking through a window cluttered with potted basil, old pickle jars, and something that might be a tomato vine trying its best. The entire apartment smells like fermentation and garlic and memory. At the center of it all is an old man stocky, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, suspenders taut, mustache curling like the ends of a cheerful frown. He stands barefoot in the middle of the floor, ankle deep in cabbage leaves. A large wooden barrel sits next to him, open at the top and fizzing gently. "You're just in time for the bottling," he says, grinning as he waves you in. Or the tasting, depending on your mood. This is Vito, and you've stumbled into his unofficial winery located entirely in his tenement bathroom. He leads you through the kitchen, past a counter stacked high with cutting boards, cheesecloth, and an alarming number of used corks. The tiny bathroom has been transformed. A large clawfoot tub, formerly known for its occasional bathing, is now the site of something far more ambitious. It bubbles gently, covered by a net to keep out dust, flies, and the occasional curious pigeon. Vito hands you a chipped glass, half filled with dark red liquid. "It's not Chianti," he warns, "but it'll make your toes sing." You take a sip. It's strong, tart, and surprisingly smooth. You cough. Vito claps you on the back. That means it's working. He chuckles and moves to the stove, where something else is simmering, a tomato sauce so rich it could file taxes. A wooden spoon stands upright in the pot, like it's ready for a duel. Historians still debate just how widespread home winemaking was in the immigrant communities of New York during the Prohibition era. While the 18th Amendment outlawed the sale and production of alcohol, it left one delightful loophole. Families were still allowed to make up to 200 gallons of wine per year for personal use. And as Vito would quickly point out, in a household with 3 aunts, 4 uncles, and a cousin who was always visiting, 200 gallons was really just a baseline. "I'm not a bootlegger," he insists. "I'm a patriot. Wine keeps the soul from drying out." He opens a wooden cabinet to show you his tools. Old corkscrews, empty bottles labeled in neat handwriting, even a wax stamp with a grape motif. His pride in the process is infectious. "I crush with my feet. Like the old country," he says. "Sanitary? Maybe not. Sacred? Absolutely." He gestures toward the tub, now gently bubbling. "That's the 3rd batch this season. First was too sharp, second too sweet. This one's just right. I call it bathtub gold." You help him rinse a few bottles in the sink, which is stained pink from grapeskins. The faucet leaks rhythmically, adding a gentle percussive beat to the otherwise quiet apartment. A radio on the windowsill plays Italian opera just loud enough to make you feel like you've been cast in a very slow, very local version of La Traviata. People come to me when they're sad, Vito says, corking a bottle with a satisfying thunk. Wine helps with grief, and love, and colds, especially the fake ones. He hands you a label to stick on the bottle written in slanted cursive. It says, "For Tony's engagement. May his wife be better than his mother." You glance toward a small table where 2 chairs flank a dish of olives and yesterday's bread. Next to it, a stack of mail sits unopened, and a pair of reading glasses rest on top. There's something tender in the way everything is arranged chaotic, but intentional. You ask Vito if he lives alone. Mostly, he says, except when people show up, which is always. He sits and pours 2 more glasses of wine. You join him, now slightly buzzed from fumes alone. Life in this place, he says, gesturing upward toward the ceiling where footsteps echo faintly, is like aging cheese. You start sharp, but if you're lucky, you mellow. You nod, unsure if you're the cheese in this metaphor or the wine, but either way, the room feels softer now. You sip again. In one corner, a shelf holds framed photos. Weddings, fishing trips, a sepia-toned image of a woman holding a bottle like a trophy. Vito notices your gaze. "That's Maria," he says, tapping the photo. "My wife. She passed, but she still critiques my wine. I hear her in my head every time I make it too dry." He chuckles, but there's warmth behind the laugh. You ask if she liked the wine. She liked the ceremony, he says. Pouring it, sharing it, the clinking of glasses, the way it made everyone talk slower, listen longer. You sit in silence a while. Outside, someone yells across the courtyard, and a dog barks twice in response. The building creaks in reply. Eventually, Vito stands. You can take a bottle if you promise to drink it with someone who talks too much. You nod. And if you return the bottle, he adds, he'll fill it again. You rise, thank him, and step back into the hallway, where the smell of wine clings to your sleeves, and your thoughts are looser, slower, warmer. And on you go. The hallway turns a final corner and quiets down. Gone are the echoes of bath buckets and clinking pots. Here, the walls seem to muffle sound, and for a moment, it almost feels peaceful. That's when you hear it, the faint, staccato clatter of a typewriter. It comes in bursts. Clack, 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 pause, clack. A rhythm that sounds like someone chasing down thoughts before they vanish. You follow the sound past faded wallpaper and another forgotten stroller, until you reach a door slightly ajar. A threadbare scarf is tied around the doorknob, its fabric fluttering just slightly from the draft. Inside, the room is dim, lit mostly by an oil lamp and the golden hush of late-day sun spilling through thin curtains. And in the center, seated like a conductor before a tiny mechanical orchestra, is a woman hunched over a typewriter. Her fingers dance across the keys, her back straight as a broomstick. She doesn't look up. "I've just killed a man," she mutters, typing furiously. On page 17, he had it coming. You hover in the doorway, unsure. The room smells like ink, paper, boiled tea leaves, and a faint trace of burnt toast. There are papers everywhere, not books, but loose pages, drafts, ideas, plot outlines. They hang from strings like ghostly laundry. They're pinned to walls, draped over chairs, and spilling from open drawers. It's less an apartment than a paper-based ecosystem. "You're not the editor," she says flatly, without glancing up. Good. He owes me a check and a public apology. "This is Beatrice?" You step inside carefully and take a seat on a wooden crate labeled plot holes and dry socks. She finally glances up. Wire-framed glasses sit crooked on her nose. Her hair's pinned into a loose bun, pencils stuck inside like arrows in a quiver. A shawl hangs from her shoulders, doubling as a blanket and possibly a curtain from a past life. She eyes you warily. Don't touch anything. I've filed everything according to emotional category. You nod. I write pulp fiction, she continues. Dime serials, mostly. Romance. Crime. Gothic tales with haunted shoes and scandalous uncles. You know, the usual. She gestures to the wall behind her, where a rejection letter is framed under the title, You Write Well, but Not Commercially. A sticker added beneath reads, That's the idea. You ask what she's working on now. This one's about a widow, with a missing husband, and a bakery full of secrets, she says. Also, maybe ghosts. But they might be metaphors. I haven't decided yet. You pick up a page from the desk, covered in tight, neat handwriting and furious margin notes like, Too many sausages? And does this horse need a name? She snatches it gently back. That's a later chapter. Spoilers. Historians still argue whether women like Beatrice Anonymous, underpaid and writing 10,000 words a week for pennies-shaped American literature from the shadows. Some say these were the true voices of the working class, smuggled between ads for soap and spectacles. Others argue their words were disposable, forgotten as soon as the next issue hit the newsstand. Beatrice, unsurprisingly, has strong opinions. I write fast, but I feel slow, she says. I feel every comma, every sigh, every bad metaphor I wrestle until it sounds like truth. She pulls a kettle from a hot plate and pours you tea into a chipped mug that says, World's Third Best Typist. The tea tastes like boiled ideas with a hint of pencil shavings, but it's oddly comforting. A stack of envelopes tied with twine sits on a nearby shelf, marked Unmailed Letters You'll Probably Regret. One envelope is open. You glimpse a line. Dear Sarah, if I never publish this, you must know I tried. You don't ask. She doesn't offer. On the windowsill, beside a half-eaten biscuit and a mason jar of dried lavender, sits a photograph of a woman in a sailor hat holding a book like it's a weapon. That's my sister, Beatrice says softly. She writes for real newspapers, the kind with facts. She shrugs. We still argue about whether dragons count as journalistic embellishment. The lamp hums faintly as she returns to typing. Clack. Pause. Clack, clack. She speaks as she writes, half to herself, half to you. The thing about these stories, she says, is that they're all based on someone I knew, or wanted to know, or imagined into existence just so I wouldn't feel alone. You ask if she ever wanted to write a novel. I have, she replies. 6 of them, all hiding inside these pages like shy mice. But serials pay the rent. Sometimes, if the editor remembers, you hear the creak of footsteps above. A door slams 2 floors down. She doesn't flinch. This place has its own rhythm now, and she's tuned to it like a radio dial. She shows you a drawer of unpublished titles. One reads, The Girl Who Slept Through a Revolution. Another, The Man Who Swallowed a Clock and Regretted It Hourly. A third is just called Eggs. You ask her how she writes so much. I don't sleep much, she says. Dreams interrupt my pacing, and there's always another sentence waiting just behind the 1M typing. She adjusts her glasses and looks at you seriously. You know what's worse than bad writing? You shake your head. No writing. Outside, the sky fades to bruised lavender. The room softens. Beatrice lights a candle and sets it near the window, as if inviting a museor, warning the editor where to find her. She hands you a small notebook. Take it, she says. Write something dumb in it, or something honest, or both. You rise, thank her, and tuck it into your coat. As you step out, she calls after you. Tell them I'm mysterious, brilliant, and allergic to critics. And if they ask about the plot holes, say they're intentional. The door clicks softly behind you, and once again, the hallway swallows you up. By now, the tenement has settled into its nighttime hush. The clamor of earlier, the clanging pots, echoing footsteps, the shrieking of children being bathed in tin tubs has melted into the kind of stillness that only old buildings understand. A few windows glow faintly with oil lamp light. Somewhere far off, a baby whimpers, then falls quiet. The building sighs under its own weight, the wooden floorboards cooling like bones after a long day. You think perhaps you've seen it all, every room, every corner of this place with too many stories to hold. But then you hear it. A sound unlike any other you've heard tonight. A mechanical chirping, almost avian, like a bird made of gears testing its wings. There's a faint click, followed by a soft humming, and a strange metallic tune that seems to wobble between notes before stopping abruptly. You follow the sound to a door tucked into a narrow alcove one you nearly missed. A sliver of warm orange light leaks out from beneath it. You knock. "Come in," calls a voice, muffled but calm, but gently. The dreams are light sleepers tonight. You step inside and are immediately surrounded by strangeness, the wonderful kind. The room is dim but aglow, lit by oil lamps, candles, and what appears to be a small firefly trap in a jar, glowing like magic. Maps are pinned to every wall, but they aren't just maps of cities or countries. One is labeled "Places My Grandfather Claimed to Visit in 1890." Another says "Cities That Vanish When You Blink." Some are real. Others are deliberately not. And in the middle of it all, crouched over a table piled with wood scraps and wire, is a man with ink-stained fingers and a tinkerer's gaze. "Im Abdul," he says without looking up. This one's supposed to chirp only at dusk, but it's ambitious. He adjusts a tiny gear with tweezers. A feather twitches. The machine on the table is part bird, part clock, part riddle. It makes a faint whirring noise and lets out a sound that almost, but not quite, resembles a sparrow trying to remember how to sing. You take a few careful steps forward. The room smells of oil, dust, and something floral, maybe cardamom, or crushed mint leaves left too long in the sun. On one shelf, you spot a teacup filled with screws. On another, a series of drawings labeled "Flying Machines for Cities That Want to Leave." Abdul finally looks up. His eyes are tired but alert. His sleeves are rolled, and there's a smudge of charcoal on his cheek. "I fix shoes during the day," he says, gesturing vaguely toward a small pile of half-repaired boots in the corner. "But at night, I make things that remember." You don't ask what he means. It seems obvious here. There's a map hanging over his bed crudely drawn in ink, with crooked lines and mysterious symbols. It's titled "My Childhood Neighborhood," as reconstructed from my mother's stories. Across the bottom, a note reads, "Scale, emotional, not geographical." Abdul is Syrian, or perhaps Palestinian, or perhaps both. He answers the question differently each time, depending on his mood. He came to New York with an uncle, lost track of the uncle somewhere between a factory job and a fire, and ended up here. The building wasn't welcoming at first, he says, but it grew used to him. Like a cat, he adds, grumpy until you feed it. He picks up another device from a nearby shelf. It looks like a locket crossed with a sundial. This one is supposed to open only when you miss someone very badly, he says. The trick is teaching the spring how to detect longing. You sit on a stool beside a girl, maybe 10 years old, who is quietly sketching a flying building in charcoal. She's barefoot, and her drawings are precise but imaginative. One shows a tenement just like this one, except it has wings, eyes for windows, and tiny legs for when flying feels like too much effort. She's my apprentice, Abdul whispers. Unofficially. She comes here when things are loud in her own apartment. I give her paper and pretend I'm teaching her. Really, I just like the company. You ask if he ever sells his inventions. Sell them? He looks almost offended. No. I give them to people who look like they've forgotten how to imagine. Some I leave on stoops. Others I trade for stories. Once, I swapped a wind-up box for 3 good jokes and a poem. Historians still argue how much artistic and intellectual life really existed inside tenement buildings like this. Some claim the conditions were too harsh, the focus entirely on survival. Others point to people like Abdul Quiet, half-forgotten creators whose rooms became sanctuaries of whimsy and resistance. For Abdul, imagination isn't a luxury, it's a tool, a rebellion, a way of not vanishing completely. Dreams, he says, are the only legal currency in some places. He offers you tea. It comes in a small brass cup, dark and syrupy, scented with cinnamon and cloves. It tastes like stories and dust and something old enough to matter. Above his workbench is a cracked mirror. Scrawled across the top in pencil are the words, "You're not wrong for hoping." Below it, a smaller note reads, "But bring tea." As the girl finishes her sketch, Abdul lights a small incense stick and lets the smoke curl around the contraption on the table. The machine chirps again, just once, then falls silent. Abdul beams. "That's progress," he says, "for something made of broken clock parts and an old metronome." You feel reluctant to leave. The room feels safe, in a way few places ever do. Not because it's clean or warm, it's neither, but because it honors something unspoken. The belief that wonder still belongs to everyone, even here, even now. As you stand, Abdul presses a folded piece of paper into your hand. "It's blank," you say. "For now," he answers. "Come back when you filled it with something." You smile. He doesn't smile back, but his eyes twinkle. The girl waves. You wave back. And with that, you step back into the hallway. The scent of cardamom clinging to your coat. The soft tick of dream machines echoing in your ears. The door closes behind you with a faint click. Another secret, tucked safely back into its room. And onward you go, into the dark. You keep walking, but your pace has slowed. The tenement no longer feels like a building made of bricks and beams. It feels like a living creature, its corridors winding like veins, each door a rib or lung, each whisper in the walls part of a slow, rhythmic heartbeat. There's no telling what time it is now. The sky outside could be black or barely blue. You've stopped trying to guess. The hallway grows narrower, the air heavier with something like flour and dust and heat. Your boots scuff softly against worn floorboards, and you pause, not because you're lost, but because the air ahead smells unmistakably of something baking. You follow it, warmth and scent leading you past a broken coat rack, a forgotten basin, and the ghost of someone's footsteps. At the end of the hall, there's a door that doesn't quite close. A strip of lamplight glows beneath it, dancing as if alive. You press gently. It opens with a sigh. Inside, the air is golden. Not just lit, but filled with warmth. A tiny stove crackles to the left. On the right, steam clouds the window panes. The curtains are lace, yellowed but neat. A kettle whistles softly on the burner, and the smell of fresh bread makes your stomach remember it exists. You hear the soft rustle of a spoon in a teacup. And there, at a large wooden table dusted with flour, is a woman in her 70s, strong-armed and steady-eyed, kneading dough as though she's shaping the past back into something useful. "Close the door behind you," she says without turning. "No reason to waste the heat." You do. The room seems to exhale once it's shut. This is Mrs. Drabinski, born in the tenement, baptized here, married and widowed here. She's outlived 2 landlords, 4 roaches she swears had names, and at least a dozen street vendors she could still imitate with pitch-perfect flair. Her hair is silver, braided and pinned in a tidy coil. She wears an apron patched with mismatched fabric and memories. Her glasses dangle from a chain around her neck, like they're only worn for show. "Sit," she says, and you do. The chair creaks like it's auditioning for a haunted house, but it holds. Her kitchen table is the center of the room, and maybe the universe. Everything circles at jars, photos, spoons, a rusted radio that crackles with static jazz. A cat you hadn't noticed before uncurls itself from a cushion on the windowsill, glances at you with mild judgment, then goes back to sleep. "You hungry?" she asks. "No? Eat anyway." She tears a piece of dough from the batch she's shaping and hands it to you. It's soft, warm, and smells like comfort. She folds the rest with methodical precision pat, press, roll, fold, over and over. It's more ceremony than cooking. "I used to run a bakery," she says, her hands never stopping. "Houston Street. Before rent made it a shoe store, then a pawn shop, then a dentist office with one very nervous dentist." You smile. She does too. Just barely. "Now, I make bread for neighbors and memories. Sometimes the neighbors become memories. Sometimes the memories come back to borrow a cup of sugar." She nods toward the stove. "Tea?" You nod. She pours you a cup of something dark, rich, and spiced with cloves and orange peel. It tastes like December, like something meant to be sipped slowly while thinking of people you've lost or haven't met yet. On the shelf behind her are rows of jars with faded labels: sugar, flour, poppy seed, cinnamon. You suspect at least 2 of them contain buttons, one holds dimes, and another is full of birthday candles with no matches. "You've been walking this building like it's a museum," she says, sitting opposite you. "That's fine. Just don't start charging admission." You ask how long she's lived here. "All my life," she says simply. "The ceiling used to leak. Now it just creaks. The walls used to talk. Now they mutter." She gestures toward the peeling wallpaper, floral and faded. "This used to be blue," she says. "Then it faded to hope. Then beige. Now it's memory." She hands you a small photo black and white, cracked in one corner. A younger version of her stands beside a man in suspenders, smiling crookedly. "My brother," she says. "Victor. Played violin in the subway for nickels. Said the acoustics were better underground. Got run over by a trolley. Lived. Said it improved his playing. The rolls go into the stove." She wipes her hands and lights a stubby candle near the bread tin. Not for light. Just ritual. Historians often overlook women like Mrs. Drabinski. She's not in the books, not in the census notes beyond her last name scribbled in cursive. But women like her built cities from yeast and patience. They kept families warm, fed, and sarcastic. They remembered birthdays. They buried neighbors. They made tea strong enough to cure Heartbreaker, at least delay it till morning. I saw you earlier, she says suddenly, with Abdul, with Beatrice, with that child drawing in the hallway. You're collecting ghosts. You nod. She smiles. Good. Someone should. She stands, her knees cracking, and opens the oven. The smell is holy. She places 2 rolls on a plate, steaming, golden, imperfectly shaped. One's for you. The other leave it on the stairs. Someone always needs one. You take a bite. It's soft inside, crusty outside, with just a hint of sweetness. I use honey, she says, because sugar forgets. Honey remembers. On the wall is a calendar from 1907. None of the dates are marked, just the words. Every day is some kind of holy if you're hungry enough. The tea warms you. The bread softens the ache in your stomach. The room glows a little deeper. You thank her. She waves it off. Come back next Thursday. I'll have more stories then. And maybe Rugelach. You rise to go, the roll wrapped in a cloth napkin now living in your coat pocket. She opens the door for you, and the hallway feels cooler by comparison. You turn back once. She's already at the sink, humming softly, sleeves rolled, ready for the next dough, or the next memory. The door clicks gently behind you, and you keep walking. The hallway narrows now, like a final breath being drawn in. You've wandered through rooms where chickens roost in parlors, where dentists operate without degrees, where bathtubs ferment secrets. You've sat beside tea kettles that whistle like lullabies and inventions that chirp when no one's looking. You've seen silence, clutter, defiance, poetry, and cardamom. And still, the tenement has one more story left to offer, not new, just different. A closing note, a kind of whisper, stitched into the wood itself. At the very top of the stairs, past the laundry line stiff with frost, and the roof door swollen with humidity, lies the attic. No one officially lives there. It's not listed on any lease, and the landlord insists it's not up to code. But someone is always up there. Or maybe it's everyone, just not all at once. You open the hatch. A thin ladder groans beneath your weight, but you climb. Slowly, deliberately. One hand, one foot. Dust rises around you like a curtain, and when your head clears the hatch, you are surrounded by dark shapes and stillness. It's not a room, exactly. More like a collection of air and memory, wedged beneath sloping beams and rafters. A mattress leans against the far wall. Nearby, a chair missing a leg holds a stack of yellowing books tied in twine. There's an old phonograph, silent now. And at the center, a round table surrounded by mismatched chairs, lit only by a cracked lantern, flickering like a heartbeat trying to stay steady. Around the table sit 5 people. You don't know their names, but their faces are familiar. Faces you've passed on the stairwell. Faces that turned toward the wall as you walked by. Now they turn toward you. You're late, says one, not unkindly. But there's still bread. You sit. No one asks where you've been. Everyone here has been everywhere. Through every room, every hardship. They've dodged leaking ceilings and shared chamber pots. They've made wine in bathtubs, drawn maps from memory, sung lullabies to children who aren't theirs. In the center of the table sits a candle, not yet lit. One of the women nods. Another strikes a match. The flame flickers to life. No one speaks, but the silence is full. You realize this isn't a meeting. It's a ritual. Not in any religious sense, but in the deeper, older way. The way people gather not to solve anything, but to simply be witnessed, to share breath, to nod when someone says, "The pipes burst again," Or, she didn't come home last night. Or, I saw a hawk circling the chimney again. That last one earns a chuckle. Then the man across from you, wrinkled, blinking slowly, leans forward. You see the walls? He says. Everyone turns. You do too. They're covered in names. Thousands of them, scratched into the wooden beams, traced in pencil, carved with broken glass. Some are full names, others just initials. Some are crossed out. Some reappear lower or sideways. Every tenant who ever lived here, he says. Every person who left part of themselves in this place. Not all of them by choice, adds another. A silence. Historians still argue whether spaces like this, forgotten attics, unofficial room, truly mattered to tenement life. They weren't part of the official square footage. They weren't in the records. But the truth is, these in-between places often held the most humanity. They were where you cried when no one could hear, where kids came to pretend they lived in castles, where men gathered to plan strikes and women to plan escapes, where candles burned for the dead and didn't ask questions. Someone places a roll of bread in front of you. It's warm, not fresh, not fancy, just made with care. Probably by Mrs. Drabinsky. Someone else passes you a cup of water. It's room temperature, cloudy, poured from a jar with a crack in the lid. Still it's offered. And so, you take it. You sit for what feels like hours, though it could only be minutes. People come and go. No one knocks. No one announces themselves. The attic receives them all. A teenage boy with a splinter in his palm. A woman in slippers carrying a broken radio. A girl with a drawing of a house that grows legs. One by one, they offer something to the center of the table, an idea, a joke, a worry, a leftover piece of pie. All accepted, all gently acknowledged. The candle burns lower, and then quietly, without instruction, everyone rises. You follow. Together, they shuffle down the stairs, back into their rooms, their lives, their versions of sleep. You linger for a moment, the attic now empty except for the warmth still hanging in the air. You place your name on the wall, just initials, small, barely visible, but it's there. And then, at last, you head back down. The building hums again, low and sleepy. The windows breathe fog. The door frames creak in solidarity. Even the roaches seem drowsy. Down below, the city groans in its sleep. You find your own boudoir, the closest thing to it. And the tenement holds you. You're still here, but the noise has softened. The rooms you passed are quiet now. The rolls have been eaten. The tea, long gone cold. The hallway light flickers once, then settles. Somewhere, someone snores gently. Somewhere else, a faucet drips like a metronome for dreams. Outside, the city fades into its late-night rhythm-muffled taxis. The hiss of steam, the rustle of papers no one will read until morning. The sky above New York doesn't sleep. Not really. But it slows. Just enough. Your eyes are heavy now. That attic scent still lingers: wood, wax, warm breath. You remember the tiny bird machine, the girl with charcoal on her fingers, the bathtub full of fermenting wine, and that blank piece of paper someone handed you. It's still folded in your pocket, isn't it? Maybe you'll fill it with something tomorrow. For now, you've walked enough rooms, dodged enough laundry lines, shared enough silences. Let the tenement hold your stories for a while. Let the walls hum their lullabies. Let the memories that aren't yours rock you gently into rest. There's nothing more to do tonight. No one else to visit. No more staircases to climb. Just you and sleep. So breathe in slowly. Let it out slower still. And let yourself drift. You are safe. You are warm. You are home. if only for now. End of story. Sweet dreams.